And they said 3 things were coming. They put them on a board. The first thing happened was a man was going north on that road, and he was talking on his cell phone. Another man was going south on that road at the same time, talking on his cell phone. They were talking to each other. They were colleagues at a business. One of the guys had forgotten papers and was going to get the papers for a business meeting. And he was coming back, and they were passing, saying hello. And the guy said, "Oh, I'm getting the papers for the meeting." And the other guy said, "Did you see the car in the lake?" And the first guy said, "No." He said, "Well, then it went in between me passing the lake and you passing the lake." So within 2 or 3 minutes of that pass, they both went, "Oh my God, that car just drove in the lake." Because otherwise they might have thought it was there for a day. Who knows? They turned around, they came back to the spot, and they figure it took them 4 minutes to turn around and get back to the site. 2 of the men got out of the car and said, "Well, I guess we're going swimming." The third man was the second miracle. They said, "You're not coming, though." He was a 9-year veteran paramedic in the car with the 2. So there's 3 men, and one of them was a paramedic. So he waited on the shore. The other 2 guys hopped in the lake and started looking for my body. And it was about 10 feet down, so they kept taking turns swimming down, and they'd reach into the car, and they felt my head. They said, "Yeah, there's somebody in there." So the other guy would go down, and they were fiddling with the doors and stuff. Nobody could get anything to move. And it was almost 15 full minutes before one of the men hooked their foot. I had a flat handle. And hooked their foot in the flat handle, and when he pulled his knee up, the door popped open. So he went back down, and he said by now he was so cold he couldn't squeeze his fingers together. So he reached his hand in, and he started to weave my hair in his hand, back and forth, kind of netting my hair. And then he said he was so tired he couldn't pull out. He had to throw his body. He said he was so cold and so tired he didn't think he was going to get anything to happen. So after a couple of pulls, like throwing his shoulder back, my body popped out. And they shoved, this guy pushed me over to the other guy who's hanging from a tree out into the middle of the road, or into the middle of the lake. And he grabs me, and he says, "When you fell back in my arm," he said, "your body was black and blue. You had moss in your eyeballs and up your nose and in your ears. Your lips were black." He said, "You were dead as anything I've ever seen." And he said, he started screaming to the guy, "Get this dead chick out of my arms. Get this dead chick out of my arms." And he said, "Don't you let me die." To his friend, "Don't you let me die." So the guy on the shore pulled me up the embankment over the guardrail and dropped me on the ground. And he started doing CPR. So now we had 3 or 4 minutes of getting them there. We had 15 minutes of getting me out. And now he starts CPR, and he's pushing on my body for 7 full minutes. And he looks over his shoulder at the other 2 guys. He said, "She's gone." And with that I sat straight up. I said, "Get my baby out of the lake." And the paramedic said that to him was a miracle, to him. Because he said, most people come back and go, "What happened? Where am I?" And he said, "You sat straight up and said, 'Get my baby out of the lake.'" In they go again. They can't find Evan's body. They're sweeping the car. They can't find his body. And I'm screaming, "Let me up, let me up." Took 4 grown men to hold me down. So that mother love thing, that, you know, mothers are really powerful when they're... Finally, a woman says, "Look, there's a boom truck." And it was only the length of this building. There's a boom truck at the top of this hill. Let's go get the guy to come down with the truck. And sure enough, the guy's sitting there having a coffee break. So they ran up the hill. He came down in seconds. It only took. 2 other men got into that lake and hooked the axle, the big grappling hook. They hooked it to the axle of the car, and they pulled the car up into the air. And they pulled it up about 12 or 15 feet, and I could see the car, and in the back window was my baby's body floating. And I'm screaming, "I killed my kid. What kind of mother kills their baby?" They open the car door, his body floats out, and somebody catches him. And everybody's saying, we got him, he's fine." I'm like, "No, he's not fine. My son's been in that lake for over a half an hour. He's not fine." They put me into an ambulance. They took me to one side of Halifax. They put my son in another ambulance, and they took him to another part of town because there was 2 different hospitals. And I'm in my hospital bed, and I'm going, I wonder, can I sit on this? So I'm in my hospital bed. My blood pressure's 250 over 195. And the doctors are there with the paddles charged, saying, "You put your feet on the floor, lady. You're going to have a cardiac arrest, and you're going to..." And I was like, "Okay." And my girlfriend rushes off to the other hospital and comes back, and she says, "Get your ass out of this bed. Your son needs you to come to the hospital." And the doctor said, we've already talked to the hospital. Her son is dead. And my girlfriend's like, get your ass out of the bed. Because she says, he's not dead. And I mean, she was actually one of the only reasons I kind of snapped out of it. And the doctor said, she can't go. She'll have a heart attack or she'll die. You know, we can't let her go. And it's not worth it because her son is brain dead anyway. I said to the doctor, what do I need to do to let you get me out of this hospital? And the doctor said, look, if your vitals are under control and your blood pressure is under control, we'll let you go. In a half an hour, I was 120/70, and my blood core pressure and everything was dead on, and my temperature was up, and I stood up stark naked and said, you better get me some clothes or I'm going naked. And this was one of those funny moments because the story's riddled with them. They brought me clothes that was 3 sizes too small. I looked like a sausage. You know, off I go to the hospital to see my son. Because my son is alive. So I'm alive. I was underwater for 15 minutes. This is all wonderful. I get to the hospital. My son's in a black room. They have him on a cooling sheet, which is blowing ice cold air around his body. He's in a little blue diaper. His eyes are opened, and they're filled with jelly because they can't get him to shut his eyes. He has tubes in every single hole in his body. He's got all these little wires into his head. Every tube that you could put a tube in, he's got tubes in, and they're filled with blood. Everything is just overflowing with blood. And I come into the room, and I'm looking around. I said, that's not my son. And they said, yes, this is your son, and he's got a very short time to live, and we want you to unplug him. We're just hanging on to nothing. There's no reason for this, and he's suffering. So we went out of the room, and there was a team of 3 neurologists telling me, unplug this boy. And I said, look, I just need a minute. So I went out in the hallway, and I'm standing there. Of course, I have no God. I'm an atheist. You know, I'm of the power of one all right, but you're looking at her. So all I've got is me. I don't have a good relationship with my mother. I don't have anything to reach out to. It's just me. And I'm standing in the hallway, and I said, what am I going to do? Because my father had a child who's been in a wheelchair with diapers and the whole thing for 25 years, and I've seen how hard this is. So I don't want that for my son. I certainly don't want it for me either, to have to care for a little boy that's just not there. I would rather him die. So I'm out in the hallway. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all of a sudden, in my ear, the same voice from the lake said, fill it up. Well, now I'm not dying. I'm not hallucinating. I'm not drowning. And I'm hearing a voice. And all of a sudden, all the memory came back of where they had taken me and what they had said to me. And they said, have faith, child. And I said, fill up what? What do you want me to fill up? And in front of me, right here, there was a bucket, old bucket with slats and grooves and 2 tin things holding it together. And it was so weathered, you could see the weathering of the board, almost like barn board. And I looked into it, so I was actually able to step up to it and look into the bucket. And when I did, at the bottom of the bucket was a silvery blob of fluid. And I said, what do you want me to put in the bucket? And when I lifted my head up and looked around, everybody, the doctors and nurses moving up and down the hallway, had a spongy, light type of thing all over their body. And I went, that must be aura, because I'd seen movies. That must be aura. That must be energy of the body. And I heard, ding, 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 ding. Right on. Now we got a communication. It's a Bob Barker communication, but I have one. So I said, okay, so you want me to put the energy, the aura, in the bucket. And I heard ding, 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 ding. I was like, okay, how do I get it out of these people and into my son? And then came this download. In my ear I get little short sentences, but the download comes, the download comes in through my chest, and something I didn't understand before, I know at this minute. And they explained to me that we are essentially 2 parts of a whole. We have an energy body, and we have a human body. And that the energy body of my son is so badly depleted, we have to rebuild it, like a blood transfusion. I mean, we all understand a blood transfusion. You go down 5 points, you better get 5 points back in. And this was the basis. We need to get all the energy into his little field.